So for this short film shoot, we wanted to explore using difficult locations and fire and smoke and a real scene of destruction and kind of really get an action movie scene filmed in a very small space. If you're doing this real, obviously you're at night, you're on the street, you've got to close off, have a whole backlot there with hundreds of crew and all the smoke and flame, whereas we're doing this in a 1,000-foot square studio in the central Soho. For directors, virtual production allows you to control the environment around the actors. It gives you much more time to capture those moments. When you're talking about interactive lighting or flickering light like this with fire and stuff, you definitely need to use image-based lighting. And so here we're using the Kino Flo Mimik to really emulate the fire and flicker the fire. Not necessarily just playing the fire on the Mimik lights, but color grading and controlling how they display the fire so it has the right effect on the skin.
It needs to really feel like this fire effect, you know, kind of more than that. I mean, what would be great, show us the highest drama and then we'll dial it back from there, but don't be afraid of going really high drama. The thing that's wonderful for me about virtual production is blending the real and the virtual worlds together. So that nuance of light and blending that line so it becomes seamless is, I think, part of the challenge of virtual production. So it's kind of, for me, I see it as a lighting challenge and I really embrace that. Now I've worked with virtual production before with traditional lights. What we're doing here today is we're working with virtual production with image-based lighting called the Mimik. So traditionally, the DOP is spending a lot of time thinking about the color of the light. Traditionally, we use color gels to match lights. We'd spend a lot of time to try and get the colors to work. And then we'd spend a lot of time, particularly with dynamic lighting like candlelight or fire or sirens or lightning strikes and all of this stuff, we'd have to work out how to get that to look as naturalistic as possible. And then what this does is that you can target area frames on your Unreal background assets and you can map those targets onto the light as a video feed. So you get the dynamics of the light and the color of the light as perfect, what we call full spectrum light. The problem with sometimes the screens is even though they produce a good color when it's direct to the camera, when you're using them as kind of like wild walls to ambient light skin, you don't get the full spectral response, so you don't get the correct colors. So these lights are designed to give you the correct colors, much like a traditional film light would, but they also have the added benefit of being able to pixelate, to take the dynamics of light, so if any light effects are moving or anything, then that replicates that. On the main screen, could we map it onto one of these Mimiks here?
The sun from the main screen?
Yeah, the main screen on set, just so we can see what a reflection looks like. And then, CJ, could you go 50% down with all the Mimiks? Just want to see what that looks like. And then as it comes back, you soften the pixels, and you can completely lose the pixels. It's prismatic. There's little kind of prisms inside. So you still manage to hold on to the contrast, but you soften the pixels.
At least half of virtual production, we kind of say, is the lighting. It's really interesting to see how Ian as DOP brings out the light and just is able to find those camera angles with the reflections, with the volume there. And at the same time, we're set dressing virtually in the background. We're adding flames, we're just blending the pavement virtually into the real set here. And part of that is the brilliant Unreal team in the background, adjusting, micro-adjusting, constantly refining so that it's fully smooth transition from real to virtual. Part of that is working really closely with the gaffer and with the lighting team so that when they adjust the lights on the set, we're aware, and then in Unreal, we are waiting, and then they say, oh, now lighting is set, and then we'll do the final blend. And we might take out 3 minutes of time before the stand-in jumps out and before the actor jumps in to do that final blend. And that's what makes the virtual production sit and feel real.
With virtual production lighting, you want full RGB WW control of your lights, because as I say, you want a full spectral response, but you also want RGB control, because as I say, it's a nuance of balancing the background and virtual environment and your practical scene, and you're balancing that with the hue of light and the saturation and the level of light. You've got to kind of make that balance, right? So you need full control of your lights. So there's no point in going to virtual production and using traditional lights. They serve a beautiful purpose, but when it comes to virtual production, you really need more control than that.